Stop crying and fold it right. You're embarrassing yourself. That was my sister-in-law's voice. I heard it. The second I pushed open the front door, still carrying my overnight bag, still wearing the same clothes I'd had on since 4 in the morning when I boarded my flight home. I'd been gone 11 days. A work trip to Portland that turned into 11 days of late nights, bad hotel coffee, and missing my daughter so much it physically hurt. She was 8 years old. She had just lost her 2 front teeth. I had watched it happen over a video call and cried in a bathroom stall afterward because I wasn't there to put $1 under her pillow. My in-laws had offered to watch her while I was away. My husband was still deployed, 6 months in, 4 to go, and my usual babysitter had her own family emergency. My mother-in-law called it an easy yes. She's family, she said. We want to help. I should have known better. I did know better. But I was desperate, and desperate people make choices they spend a long time unpacking afterward. I stepped inside and followed the sound. My daughter was standing in the living room, holding a fitted sheet that was almost as big as she was. Her small arms shaking from the effort of trying to fold something that didn't want to cooperate. Her face was red. Not from effort, from crying. The kind of crying where you've been told to stop so many times that you've learned to do it silently, just tears sliding down while your expression stays frozen. My sister-in-law was on the couch. Legs crossed, phone in hand, glass of iced tea sweating on the end table next to her. She didn't look up when I walked in. My mother-in-law was in the kitchen doorway, watching my daughter with her arms crossed. Again, she said, shake it out and start over. A girl your age should know how to do this properly. My daughter shook out the sheet, started again. Her chin wobbled. I said, hey baby. She looked up, and the way her face changed, the way relief broke across it like something cracking open. I will carry that image for the rest of my life. She dropped the sheet and ran to me, and buried her face in my neck and finally let herself cry the way she'd been holding in. I held her. I didn't say anything to them. Not yet. My mother-in-law said, oh, you're back early. My sister-in-law finally looked up from her phone. We were teaching her some responsibility. She's been here almost 2 weeks. She needs to learn. I rubbed my daughter's back in slow circles and looked at them both over her shoulder. Go get your things, I whispered to my daughter. We're leaving. She didn't ask why, she went. I turned around and walked out the front door to the driveway. I sat in my car with the air conditioning running and I called my financial advisor. Not because I had some elaborate plan ready to go, but because 3 months earlier, when my father-in-law had a health scare and the bills were stacking up, I had quietly stepped in. My husband didn't even know the full extent of it. I had co-signed on a small business loan for my sister-in-law's boutique. The one she'd been trying to launch for 2 years, the one that my mother-in-law had been not so subtly pressuring me to support ever since my husband deployed. Like it was somehow my obligation. Because I still had an income and she didn't. I'd signed because I wanted peace. Because I thought generosity might buy me some goodwill in a family that had never quite accepted me. Because I was tired of being on the outside. I sat in that car and told my financial advisor I needed to explore my options for withdrawing from a co-signed business agreement. My daughter came out of the house 12 minutes later with her duffel bag and her backpack and her stuffed rabbit that she'd had since she was 3. She climbed into the back seat and buckled her seatbelt and said, "Can we get drive-through on the way home?" "Anything you want," I said. We didn't talk much on the drive. She fell asleep 20 minutes in, cheek pressed against the window, rabbit tucked under her arm. I drove and thought and tried to stay calm. The call came the next morning. My mother-in-law, "I think there may have been a misunderstanding," she said. "We were just trying to help her grow up a little. You do coddle her, you know. Her father would agree." I said, "Her father is halfway across the world and doesn't know this conversation is happening." "We raised him," she said, and her voice had that particular edge to it, that tone she used when she wanted to remind me that I was always going to be secondary. An add-on. A wife, yes, but not quite family. "We know what discipline looks like." "Discipline," I said. "Is that what it was?" She made it sound like I was being dramatic. I told her I had to go and hung up. My sister-in-law called an hour later. I don't know what she told you, she started, but she's a kid. Kids need to learn. My loan approval is supposed to finalize next week, and I just need to know that we're okay, that you're not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything, I said. I need some time to think. I wasn't lying. I did need time. I spent 3 days thinking about what generosity without reciprocity actually costs. I thought about all the holidays where I had cooked and cleaned, and smiled while my mother-in-law praised my sister-in-law's casserole she'd bought pre-made from the grocery store. I thought about the baby shower they threw where my sister-in-law was given the good china, and I was handed a paper plate without anyone noticing or caring. I thought about my daughter, who had spent 11 days at the house, being treated like a small inconvenience with hands useful enough to put to work. I thought about her face, that frozen, silent crying. On the 4th day, I called my financial advisor back. Then I called the bank. The process wasn't instant. Nothing like this ever is, despite what people might assume. But I had options I hadn't fully understood until I started asking questions. I was a cosigner, not a guarantor with unlimited obligation. There were legal avenues. I took them, quietly, carefully, with documentation. The boutique loan did not finalize the following week. I didn't announce it. I didn't call them to explain. I found out. They found out when my mother-in-law called me on a Wednesday afternoon, and her voice had lost its edge entirely. It had gone soft in a way I'd never heard from her before. Almost unrecognizable. "There's been a problem with the loan approval," she said. "The bank is saying there's an issue with the cosigner. I think there might be an error." "No error," I said. Silence. "I withdrew," I said. "I had the right to." More silence. Then, "Do you understand what you've done? She has inventory ordered. She has a lease deposit down. Do you understand what kind of position you've put her in?" I thought about my daughter's shaking arms, the sheet she'd been made to fold and refold, the silent tears. "I understand exactly," I said. She started talking about family, about loyalty, about how my husband would feel when he found out. I let her talk. When she was done, I said, "Call me again when you're ready to have a different kind of conversation." And I ended the call. My sister-in-law's messages came fast after that. First confusion, then pleading, then anger. She cycled through all 3 in under 2 hours. The last message was the one that told me everything I needed to know. "You did this out of spite because you can't handle the fact that your daughter is spoiled and needed some toughening up." I screenshot it, saved it, showed it to no one. Because the thing about people like her is that they don't even realize what they're confessing when they're angry. She wasn't defending her behavior, she was confirming it. She believed what she'd done was correct. That my daughter had needed it. That I was the problem for objecting. I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say to someone who would look at an 8-year-old crying over a bedsheet and call it education. The family group chat had opinions. My mother-in-law's sister sent me a long message about keeping the peace. Some cousin I'd met twice at holidays weighed in. My husband's uncle, who lived 2 states away and had not once asked about my daughter in the entire time I'd known him, had thoughts. I removed myself from the chat. Quietly, no announcement. I wrote my husband a letter instead. Not an email, a real letter. Because that's what we had agreed to when he deployed, that we would write real letters for anything important. I told him what happened. All of it. The laundry, the crying, the loan, what I'd done and why. I told him I wasn't asking for permission or approval. I was telling him because he deserved to know, and because I trusted him to understand. I mailed it and I waited. Meanwhile, I started paying attention to my daughter in a different way. Not the anxious, guilty kind of attention I'd been paying since I got home. The kind where you keep checking her face for damage. Something quieter than that. I started watching her the way you watch a plant. You've moved out of a bad spot and placed in the sun. At first, there were signs I didn't love. She would go very still if I raised my voice, even just to call her for dinner from another room. She started folding her own clothes without being asked, and she did it with a kind of anxious precision that was not normal for an 8-year-old, who 2 months ago used to shove everything into her drawer in one crumpled ball. I didn't make a big deal of it. I just started narrating the opposite. When she folded something, I'd say, "You don't have to do that right now, you know. Go play. I've got it." When she braced herself at a loud sound, I'd put my hand on her shoulder and say, "We're good. Everything's fine." Small things, consistent things. There's no dramatic moment when a child starts to unknot. It's slow. It's a Tuesday when she shoves something into her drawer without folding it, and you realize you haven't seen her do that in weeks, and it feels like a small miracle. It's the afternoon. She dumps out an entire box of craft supplies on the kitchen table and doesn't ask if it's okay first. It's the morning she comes padding into your room before your alarm goes off and climbs into bed and falls back asleep with her head on your arm, and you lie there not moving because you don't want to wake her, and also because this specific wait, this specific warm breathing, is the thing you were protecting. The letter to my husband took 3 weeks to reach him. He called me on a video connection that kept cutting in and out, and I could see him clearly enough to read his face. He was quiet for a long time after I finished talking. Then he said, "I should have been there." "You couldn't be," I said. "Tell me she's okay." I turned the phone around and showed him our daughter at the kitchen table, head bent over a drawing, talking to herself the way she does when she's deep in something. He watched for a moment and I heard him exhale. "She's okay," I said. "Yeah," he said. "She is." He didn't call his mother that day. I know because she called me first thing the next morning, clearly still expecting him to intervene on her behalf. I could tell by the way she opened with, "I assume you've spoken to him now," as if his intervention was a given, as if all roads led back to her being right. "We've spoken," I said. She waited. "He's not going to call you about this," I said. "That's his choice to make, not mine." She made a sound like I had said something unforgivable. Then she said, "I hope you know that what you did to your sister-in-law's business is going to follow her for a long time. You may have destroyed something she worked very hard for." I thought about what I wanted to say. I thought about how easy it would have been to unpack everything. Every dinner, every holiday, every paper plate, every smirk when my mother-in-law said something pointed, and my sister-in-law laughed. I could have done that. I had the receipts, emotional and otherwise. Instead, I said, "She should have thought about what she was working for before she put my daughter to work." I ended the call. My husband did eventually speak to his mother. He told me about it weeks later. Not in detail, just that the conversation had happened, and that it had not gone well, and that he was working through some things. I gave him space for that. I knew how hard it was, loving parents who had failed you in ways you were still learning to name. The boutique didn't open. The inventory was returned. My sister-in-law moved on to something else, the way people like her do when one venture collapses. Quickly, without reflection, blaming the circumstances and never themselves. My mother-in-law sent me a card 4 months later. A real card, handwritten, slipped into our mailbox. It said she was sorry for some things. It didn't say which things. It didn't say my daughter's name. I put it in a drawer. I didn't throw it away. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to know what I wanted to do with it yet. My daughter, by then, had moved on in the way children do when they're given enough safety, fully, without looking back. She joined an after-school art club. She made a best friend named something with a lot of syllables that I couldn't spell correctly for weeks. She went to a birthday party and came home with green frosting on her cheek and the kind of loose, easy laughter that told me she'd spent the afternoon just being a kid. One evening, I was washing dishes, and she came and stood next to me. She picked up a dish towel and started drying without being asked. I looked at her. "What?" she said. "Nothing," I said. We stood there together finishing the dishes, and I thought about all the things I'd learned in the past several months, about what it means to step in, about how generosity given to people who don't respect it is not a virtue. It's a slow leak that drains you. About how protecting someone you love sometimes looks like withdrawing something someone else wanted. About how families are not defined by blood or paperwork, or who had who first. They're defined by who shows up, and who stays, and who. When they find a little girl crying silently over a bedsheet in a house that was supposed to be safe. Acts like it matters. My husband comes home in 8 weeks. He knows everything. He has had a lot of time to think. So have I. What I know is this. The day I walked into that living room and saw my daughter's face, something settled in me instead of breaking. Like a decision I hadn't known I was already making, clicked into place. I didn't go looking for a fight. I wasn't angry in the dramatic shouting way. I was something quieter and more permanent than anger. I was done. Done being the one who signs and covers, and shows up and shrinks herself at the dinner table. Done letting people confuse my patience for permission. Done handing my softness to people who called it weakness, and then used it to teach my daughter that she should be soft too, and then punished her for it. I signed my name on that loan agreement to buy peace. What I bought instead was clarity. The clearest thought I have ever had in my life was sitting in that driveway with my daughter asleep in the back seat and her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, watching my in-laws' front door and knowing with complete certainty that I would never again do anything in that family. That wasn't entirely, deliberately my own choice. Some people will say I went too far, that I should have talked it out. That family deserves second chances and grace and the benefit of the doubt. Those people were not there. They didn't see my daughter's arms shaking. They didn't see the way she ran to me. My daughter doesn't shake anymore when I call her name from the other room. Last week, she left an entire trail of craft supplies across the living room floor and didn't clean them up for 2 days. And I sat there, looking at that mess like it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. She is 8 years old. She should make messes. She should be a little inconsiderate sometimes. She should spill things and forget things and leave her shoes in the middle of the hallway for me to trip over. She should never have to earn the right to be a child in a house where she is supposed to be loved. She knows that now. So do I.